What's good guys, I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I've been playing around with the Samsung Galaxy S9 phones for a couple of weeks now. But one thing we haven't done yet is a detailed, full-blown Mr. Who's the Boss style battery drain test. And we've got it coming right here, right now. But just before that, I'm launching a brand new, pretty cool Samsung Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus giveaway. So check it out, link is in the description below. So yeah, let's get right into it. Alright, as we're setting the phones up for the battery test, a couple of things will spring to mind. Both the Galaxy S9 Plus and the Note 8 are capable of 2K plus resolutions, but here have been set to 1080p, just because that is a default setting they come on, and that is what most people will use them in. The iPhone X is operating at a much higher resolution than that, and the Nokia 8 even higher, but the iPhone X has by far the smallest battery of the bunch, so the odds are somewhat stacked against it. So to kick things off, we've pulled up Instagram, something most people will use on somewhat of a day-to-day basis, and it seems to have affected the Nokia and the Galaxy Note 8 particularly hard. The iPhone seems like it's on 100%, that is what the battery indicator will tell you, but this is a trick Apple has been known to pull. They make the battery indicator fall very slowly to begin with, to give consumers an initial level of confidence. Let's see if it changes over the course of this battery test. After about 30 minutes, the Nokia 8 is in last place, mind you, closely followed by the Galaxy Note. Now the Note 8 was a really great phone, but one of the reasons, probably the main reason I didn't recommend it to people, was battery life. But thankfully, everything is pointing towards the S9 Plus being better. It has a very slightly smaller display, which is going to consume a little bit less battery. It's got a larger battery capacity, although again, not by too much, but also a newer, next generation, more efficient chipset, and combined these should make quite a significant difference. So after about an hour, none of these batteries have really taken too much of a hit. Things like Instagram and YouTube, they don't pose too much of a threat to battery life. So to ramp it up a little bit, we've pulled up AAA, which is an application that simulates up to 200,000 particles on display and allows the phone to manipulate them. It's pretty promising that at least so far, the S9 Plus is neck and neck with the OnePlus 5T, which combined with the OnePlus 5 is pretty much the battery king, especially given how small the capacity is. The iPhone is, technically speaking, still on top, but from past experiences is probably going to lose its lead pretty quickly, and is heading in that direction right now. Now, you might also be starting to notice the Nokia 8, which, in the backdrop of all of this, is slipping away into a very comfortable last position. And it's not really much of a surprise when you think about it. It's got the highest resolution display of the bunch, and one of the smaller batteries here too. So the game we're playing right now is called Free Fire, and you may be able to tell they have basically completely ripped off PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. I don't blame them, it's pretty popular right now. But if you combine the high data bandwidth this is using, as well as some pretty poor optimization and some decent looking graphics, this should be pretty demanding on battery life. And sure enough, after just 10 minutes of that, we've knocked a good chunk of battery life off all the phones, most notably the Nokia. The iPhone X has now almost completely equalized with the S9 Plus and the OnePlus 5T, which amazingly are still completely neck and neck, the exact same percentage. The Note 8 has fallen quite a lot behind quite quickly, but that is to be expected. And considering how similar it is to the S9 in terms of battery capacity, screen resolution, amount of RAM, and the general software experience, a lot of the benefit we're seeing on Samsung's newer phone is probably because of the new generation of chips. So that's something. As expected, Antutu Benchmark seems to be running them down pretty well indeed. So we'll run that a couple more times before we switch up to some gaming. Worth noting is the score that the new S9 Plus gets, which is a good 10% above every other phone, but we will run some other benchmarks to get a bit of a better idea of performance, notably Geekbench, which is, I've got to say, a little bit more of a boring one to watch, but nonetheless we'll run it very quickly, just to see how the phones perform and of course drain battery. And in this, the iPhone X is actually the winner by quite a long stretch. It could be an optimization issue on Android, but at the same time the A11 Bionic chip in the iPhone is still meant to be quite a bit ahead of its time. The iPhone X has slipped into third place now, but notably not by as much as in some of our previous battery tests, so what seems to have happened is progressive iOS updates might have improved its battery life a little bit, which is completely plausible considering when the iPhone X released, a lot of iOS had to be reworked because of the lack of home button, which does leave room for initial inefficiencies. So if you've managed to keep track of all of this while also peering at the phone on the right hand side, you might realize we are well into 3 hours of this test. And the only phone I'd say isn't performing too well is the Nokia. 3 hours and 30 minutes into this pretty intensive battery drain test, and the other 4 phones are quite close to 50% battery. So what we're doing now is heading on to the Play Store or App Store on the iPhone and downloading Angry Birds Go, which is a pretty intensive racing game made by Rovio, the same company that made the original Angry Birds. Whilst the S9 and the OnePlus are still trading blows at the top, the Nokia has really fallen away from the pack. This is a phone that we've never really included in the past in our detailed battery drain tests, but safe to say it's nothing short of a poor performing phone in this area. And there's not really much of an excuse for it. Whilst it does have a higher resolution display, the actual display size is the smallest of the bunch, and that should somewhat compensate for it. Recording 4K 30 frames per second video on all the phones should be a pretty demanding task too, and that knocks the Nokia down to single digits. The Note 8 isn't keeping up too well either. It is now 15 percentage points behind the S9 Plus, which has cemented its lead over the OnePlus 5T. And that seems like cause for celebration. That is really impressive. The OnePlus 5T we're using here is literally fresh out the box. It has had less than 10 charging cycles. So this test can't even have been spoiled by having used it for a long period of time. This is impressive. One final set of particle simulations has sent the Nokia to the grave, but surprisingly the iPhone X is relatively unfazed. We know the battery life of this phone is quite a bit better than the iPhone 8, but I was not expecting it to hold up this well against the other two phones. So we've got Real Racing 3 pulled up here, so this should put a pretty serious dent in battery life. And for the sake of variety, we're going to close that and open up one final game. That's going to be Super Mario Run, just because it's a pretty standard, pretty popular game that a lot of people will play. Almost immediately, within minutes of loading this game up, the Galaxy Note 8 packs it in and calls it a day. No surprises there, it hung on pretty well considering how low the percentage was. The iPhone X is hanging in there pretty well, but the last 10 percentage points is really where the iPhones historically have just shot down straight to zero, so we'll see if that happens here. It would be interesting to see how the standard Galaxy S9 compares against these other phones. Compared to the Plus, it does have less processing power and a slightly smaller display, but to compensate also a smaller battery capacity. My hunch would be that it would last just a little bit less than the S9 Plus, but we'll have to test that. Let me know if you want to see that in a video. As expected, the last 10 percentage points is pretty dramatic, and the OnePlus 5T has truly strengthened its lead over the iPhone X, and the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus over the OnePlus 5T. We'll compare the exact survival times just after these two phones have run out, but the very fact that the S9 Plus is beating the 5T is unprecedented. The phone is still clinging on even 15 minutes after this, albeit just by a thread. We're only YouTube streaming here, so we're not expecting it to kill the battery really quickly. If this was Antutu benchmark, it would have been a bit of a different story, but I'm trying to keep the test as balanced as possible. Sure enough, at 6 hours and 34 minutes, that is a really long time, the 5T calls it a day. So what are the final results? How much did the Galaxy S9 Plus beat the OnePlus 5T by? And I guess more interestingly, how badly did the Nokia 8 lose? Let's find out. So as you know, the Nokia 8 was in a very comfortable last position with 4 hours 33. That is way off the next contender, that is the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, which got a much more respectable 5 hours 24. This was then further bested by the iPhone X, which slightly outperformed my expectations, and with 6 hours 10, that gap was hardly small either. The 5T, no longer the king in this situation, took home 6 hours and 34, and the Galaxy S9 Plus took it away, continuing that YouTube stream at 6 hours and 47. Alright guys, that was a really long video, but if you stuck it out this far, congratulations, and also I really hope you enjoyed yourself. Don't forget to enter the giveaway down below, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, that would mean so much to me if you could smash that button. With that being said, my name is Aaron, and this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.